riots and looting cost the country 50 billion rand, you'll remember, and saw state insurance company SASRIA receiving claims of up to 32 billion rand. The report says the state was woefully inadequate in its response. Let's talk to the president of Business Unity South Africa, Bonang Mohale now. Mr. Mohale, thanks very much indeed for your time. So no doubt the panel compiling this report spoke to business bodies like BUSA, whose members took a tremendous hit with those riots. What did you tell them, and are you happy with the final report?
Yes, we are absolutely happy and we support all its recommendations. But we are on record as business having said that for the ANC's own internecine strife and war, this ANC-led government was actually quite prepared to burn down the whole country. As business, we said there were 3 pockets that we saw on those 2 weeks in July. To be more specific, some talk about the 8 days in July. But remember, this has been happening and building up for the last 3 years. The first is the 12 dirty dozen people who agitated and orchestrated for this. I think they need to spend some time in jail. The second piece is the people that actually were enveloped by absolute desperation, and that's what should concern all of us. Lastly, of course, there was a group about just pure criminality. For the report to lay bare that the National Security Council could have done better, that the security cluster was pointing fingers all across with no palpable intelligence. Even if they did receive that intelligence, they had absolutely no capacity to process it, to comprehend it, and therefore to put in place to react, let alone to be proactive. There was also a piece that says the police minister, together with the commissioner of police, could have better communicated. This is demonstrated in where initially they say, no, we don't need the army. 2 days later, they say, no, we do need the army, 2,500 people. Then, no, it's 10,000 people. And then on the third day, they come to the right number that they should have started with in the first place, to say 25,000. Therefore, to say that they were sleeping on the job, that they were inept, that they have no capacity, is actually an understatement. Devon, we sent police people that we knew that were under-resourced. Less than 200,000 by the minister's own admission. The private security companies have 550,000 personnel strong. Secondly, we send them there with absolutely no training, no preparedness. Thirdly, they didn't have enough rubber bullets. They didn't have enough bulletproof vests. They didn't have enough tear gas canisters. And for the first time in the history of this country, the people that were looting were also armed and shooting back at the police. So at our time of collective trauma as 60.1 million South Africans, the job that is constitutionally mandated to the security cluster to protect us, they folded their arms and did absolutely nothing. Let me end by saying, Devon, we saw the Value Logistics warehouse as one of the 11 that burned and 8 factories that were touched, being looted not for 1 day, not beyond the National Disaster Management Act that said a curfew could have kicked in at 2100 hours. But throughout the day, throughout the night, for 72 consecutive hours, there was no visible response from our police and indeed the security cluster, which leads us as South Africans to just accept that we are naked, we are on our own. Devon?
Yeah, and that brings me to my next point. I mean, you speak about the political fabric in this thing, and it's quite clear you made your point there. Then, of course, logistically and preparedness, you're saying it just isn't there. We're 6 months down the line, Bonang. Can this happen again as far as business is concerned?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because what are the tinderbox? What is the ticking time bomb? It is the highest levels of unemployment in the world, the highest inequality in the world, the highest failure rate of small and medium enterprises in the world. It is the second highest suicide rate in the world after China. It is our own infrastructure in terms of Transnet, in particular the Durban port, that is the third from the bottom. You see, Devin, when you have young people of military age sitting at home and doing absolutely nothing, not only are we inviting trouble, we are actively looking for it. With youth unemployment at 74.9%, the things that are keeping us awake at night is when Zondo released his state capture report, we said we must act, there must be execution. But youth unemployment is the second biggest risk we are facing in this country. Thirdly, of course, is economic growth. If the economy is not growing, very soon we'll be talking about the redistribution of poverty, not the redistribution of wealth.
Then can I just come in there, Mr. Mohale, if I can just come in there. Does Thursday offer any promise in it? The State of the Nation address comes up. We saw the President make promises around exactly what you're talking about, economic and employment improvements. We still have, from last year's State of the Nation address to now, a record 12 million working-age South Africans, as you point out of work in the country. Do you think that Thursday holds any promise in it when he takes the podium?
Unless we focus on what is it that we're going to do, the 4, no more than 5 things that we're going to do in a year, not in another 5 years, to address the issue of jobs by the private sector, not by government, because when the private sector creates jobs, it's not in and of itself, it's creating the markets of the future. We must address the issue of transformation because that's what the radical economic transformation faction is playing on and calling business that is heavily invested, not only in today, but in this country's future as white monopoly capital. I think we need to address the issue of saying South Africa is now open for business. And the only strategic conversation that investors and analysts understand is to get the top state capture miscreants into jail. And then, of course, energy is the 4th means of production. Each time Eskom switches off, this economy loses 2 to 3 billion South African rands a day, every day. It's good to say, we are going to revamp now our nuclear power station, Quebec, at the cost of 20 billion. But you don't include the cost to the economy, you don't include the opportunity costs, and you don't include the cost of buying diesel, not only to address base load, but also peak load at this time, which is also peak time when most of us are at home, are connected, but also are consuming probably the most amount of electricity.
All right, well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Well, thanks very much indeed for those remarks ahead of that State of the Nation address by President Cyril Ramaphosa on